Hello and welcome to another episode of 7th Tier Podcast, a weekly Storybook Brawl podcast focused on strategy and high-level play. My name is Jethro, and I am joined this week and every week by your friend and mine, the best Total War Warhammer player I know. It's Sith. Sith, how's it going?
Look, I haven't played a huge amount of Storybook Brawl this week. I've been looking forward to Total War for a long time. I do still play this game, I promise.
It's not too late to pivot the podcast. What's good in the Total War meta right now?
I think that is its a whole different kettle of fish.
You're not even gonna tell me. It's so rude. So rude. He keeps his Warhammer strat such a secret. It's that's not actually what we're here to discuss this week. We're here as usual to talk all things Storybook Brawl. We've got another tournament coming up in 5 days' time as I'm recording this.
Yep.
Hyped for. I think it's the last one from this season that you can qualify for free before it's, well, if you didn't make top 8, you get the month off.
Yes. I believe March is when the first seasonal championship that qualifies you for Worlds is. Well, yeah, exciting.
Yes, I'm excited to watch that on Twitch.
Yeah.
I can still qualify. I can qualify this weekend. There's loads of time. We're kicking things off this week the same way we kick off every week with our stats from the last 7 days. Sith, how have the last 7 days been treating you on the ladder?
Yeah. Not played a massive number of games, played 26 games. Average place at 2.54, which is my second best ever after last week's, which is pretty good. 23 top 4s out of 26, not bad at all. And 9 crowns, same as last week. Nothing stands out really in my stats, other than one hero that we're going to get to later, that I think is really, really good this patch.
Ooh, stay tuned.
Yeah, it's been a pretty standard week. I've not played a huge amount. I've been watching more streams than I've been playing, honestly. But yeah, nothing too stand out for me.
Who are the good streamers worth checking out?
Sure. Shout out, certainly Lolnenko is one of my absolute favourites. Though I am a mod in his channel, so maybe I'm a little biased.
Hashtag sponsored.
I put Icarus on fairly often. Carlim, wonderful streamer. Yeah, several more I could mention. Sorry if I didn't shout out your name. There are plenty more I watch out there, but those are the first that came to mind.
My week, I've also had a pretty good week. I've climbed to top 100, which is always a good feeling. I've played 33 games with 12 crowns, 24 top 4s, an average finish of 3.15. One of my best since we started recording these. And a crowns to bottom 4s ratio that's finally above 1, which is I think what I aim for, which is more crowns than bottom 4s. Sort of the bare minimum that Sith aims for. Right, your 3.0 or whatever. 3 times as many crowns as bottom 4s. But I'm getting there.
Yeah, for sure.
In terms of what stood out to me on the ladder, the meta right now is nasty, brutish, and short. It is an absolute bloodbath out there. The games are so aggressive. Like, you can be dead by 5.0 very easily. And you can be in a lobby where most of the people are dead by tier 6.
Yeah.
Dead or on a very low life point total. Like, a lot of damage has been dealt in this lobby. Yes, 6 people are still alive, but if none of them are over 15 hit points, some people are dead. They just haven't stopped moving yet.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely know that experience of being the dead person there. Where I'm like, yeah, I can't ever beat the top 2 people. I'm waiting to be paired against them to die.
I've had a couple of games this week, though, where because the way that changes the speed of the lobby, you can have a powerful turn at, like, a weird time, and it can be okay, and you can convert it to a top 3 or top 2 finish. Like, I had a Horde Dragon game where I'd collected mice for a really long time. Like, turn 2, I had 2 mice. And I was like, okay, this is my game plan. And then on 3.0, I bought a Cinderella and a Princess White, and then free-rolled the shop. And I was like, okay, we're now buying any dwarf, we're buying any mouse, that's our game plan. And so then it was 4.2, and I hadn't seen a dwarf, and I hadn't seen a mouse.
Yeah.
And I was super dead. So I sold off the mice. I think I moved towards dwarves. Yeah, 4.2 is when I found the Tweedledee. So I moved towards dwarves, sold off the mice. I sold off the mice to cast Blessing of Athena on my board, because I was like, I need to never lose another fight. I'm on 2 health. It's too late for these mice.
Yeah. Understanding that that's a big part of what you have to do when you're low health is a really important skill in this game to, like, because that is a low value play. But if you're dying, you have to. It's part of the reason that winning early fights is so good is you don't have to make those desperation plays.
And so then on 5.1, 5.2, I tripled, I think it was the greedies, not even the Tweedles, but I tripled some dwarves at last. And I got the monkey's paw that I had been hoping that the mice would give me as, like, this power spike on, like, 3.1. I was like, well, that's too late for this monkey's paw now, but I guess I'll take it. It's the most stats I could put on the board this turn. And I won that lobby. And I didn't understand it at all. It felt completely too late for that power spike. But because everyone had been losing so much health in the mid game, I actually had enough strength to convert that towards the end of the lobby. I got lucky. I found the Lordy. Not gonna lie. I won a fight. I was 15% to win.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely how like almost all the tournament lobbies feel like that, and I think this meta is pretty conducive to feeling like that in terms of, because the best, probably still, even after Boss's removal, one of the best comps in the game is Dwarves, and the power spike for Dwarves is tier 4. It's not anything else. Like, Dwarves comes online really early, they are really strong in that mid game, and you just die really hard sometimes.
I want to talk about Slay in that conversation as well.
Yeah,
because
sure.
The way Slay works, your backline is really weak. And your front line has enormous hard carries on it. You've got big dragons, you've got big Lancelots, that sort of thing. Which means that when you win, most of your backline is alive. And they want that backline to be golden. Which means that when you lose to Slay, you're always taking 15 to 20 damage a lot of the time. And that can be as early as tier 5.0.
And I actually want to say Slay also has the opposite thing, where if you can break through their one or two big Slay units, their backline is a joke. So you often like, if you can kill, if you're bigger than their front unit, your thing attacks into their Lancelot and lives. They don't have anything else. You deal 7-10 damage to them because the rest of your team is alive. I agree that does lead to very swingy life totals, for sure. And Slay is inherently feast or famine, right? Like, it definitely has this.
Yes.
I get a bad matchup. My two lightning dragons attack into the Salt Act units. I lost that fight and just died. Cool. Whereas if instead, my dragons both slayed, and now not only am I much stronger in this fight, I'm stronger forever. It is night and day how those fairly random, from your perspective, like, what can you can't control whether or not your opponent has randomly teched in a Salt Act. It's just an inherent risk of a lightning dragon, but it's terrifying.
If your lightning dragon's small to begin with, like, you need to get those first slays with it, and it misses its 1 in 3 to slay. Like, I had a game the other day where it just ran into the opponent's hippocamp, and what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I won that fight because they were playing hippocamp. I don't know what they were thinking. But I was really annoyed that I missed, because the slays can be worth so much, especially on the dragon, especially those early slays, when you really need those Bad Moon and those Mermaid stats to start that Dragon Ball rolling.
For sure. So yeah, that's, kind of a brief overview of how we felt. Next, we're going to head into kind of a more structured meta check-in. We're going to go through what we think the valid comps in the game are, as just kind of a holistic look at the kind of things you can be building. Obviously, there are, comps that are incredibly treasure dependent. Basically, every tier 7 treasure has its own comp secretly, but we're mostly going to talk about things that you can actively be pursuing, keeping in mind, and just where we're ranking them at the moment based on our experiences.
Yeah, these are the things that I'm thinking going into a game and during the game. So we're kicking things off in S tier. I think there's really 3 comps right now that are worthy of S tier. There's that you can win a lobby with pretty consistently if you get it and you get it going. There's Dwarves, which we mentioned already. There's Dragon Slay, which we've talked about already. I wanted to clarify that Slay isn't always Lightning Dragon based. Like, you don't always get the pieces, Lightning Dragon and Mermaid and Baba Yaga, and probably the treasures to go with it as well. You can definitely be a Yorm comp where your Yorm is massive, but you don't have the dragon. But the S tier version, you have that dragon triggering that Yorm right at the start of the game.
Yeah, for sure. Like, the other version of Slay that's getting their scaling from, say, a Chupacabra or from a Lancelot is a different comp than, because they're much worse with Yorm, mostly, is the difference. Like, that comp is mostly, I've got 1 or 2 big Slay units, and then maybe a Shoulder Fairies to pay that off, especially if you're doing Chupa and Lance. That works quite well together. But you can't, like, 2 units in front of a Baba Yaga with a Grimsoul isn't the best Yorm comp, because where does your Yorm go in the back? Oh, my backline's really busy. Does it go in the front? Then it can get 1-inated. Whereas if you've got that dragon, it can't get 1-inated, because the dragon slays, and then already it's 100-100, and yeah, Yorm without that is way risky.
But it's still enough stats to take on a late game.
Oh,
like, if
yeah,
you've got the Baba Yaga, so you get a lot of triggers on your Yorm, and you've got the Grim Souls. Like,
Sure.
I think it's still worthy. The final S tier comp, I would say, is Hat Ball. I'm calling this Hat Ball, not Mages, because I think Aeon Ball is no longer good enough right now. I think 5.0 is actually too late for your Aeon to slay. Dwarves are too big, Slay is too big, unless you're using a bunch of Grim Souls. The only time I've got that to work on this patch was when my Golden Poly turned into an Aeon.
Sure.
And I had Crystal Ball. It was a waddle game. Great fun.
Yeah, I also want to say, like, the nerf of Merlin has really pushed me away from kind of mages. Like, Merlin was definitely the kind of character where I was kind of soft forcing mages every game because, you know, he gains so much benefit from Hat Ball, and even with just Hat or Ball, you can still do Aeon stuff and have a good time with Merlin. But yeah, with Merlin being much worse, like, he's gone from A tier to, I don't know, C, B, D, pretty bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm much less interested in mages as a whole, and, you know, Ninth Book, also at tier 6, really hard to get hold of, way too slow to be, like, tripling Storm Kings is way too slow for the meta we're talking about. So yeah, I think Hat Ball are still a good way of getting stats. Like,
I think Hat Ball's most relevant on Peter Pants. That's definitely the place where I go Hat Ball most of the time at the moment.
Yep.
And I think Peter Pants is still an A tier, S tier hero.
yeah, like, you shouldn't be forcing it as anyone. The only time I even, like, try and think quite actively about it is on hero. Yeah, I've said this before, but Wonder Waddle, Horde Dragon, the heroes that have really good access to tier 3 treasures, can consistently assemble it. Anyone else, if you take a hat because it's a fairly good treasure and get the ball later, great, but you shouldn't get the hat and then go, cool, I'm all in on tripling 3-drops. That's a recipe for disaster. Unless you're, like, again, Dwarves, one of the better comps for getting Hat Ball, because you're getting a Princess White, you're looking for triplies, and you were probably, like, you're okay looking for luckies and stuff in the mid-game anyway. I've been Hat Ball Dwarves, and you know what? Doublies would love you to cast spells at them to give them stats. You need to find some other targets, because you need a tree and a princess and all the other jazz, but, you've got a princess, you've got Princess White. You know, you can...
What you really need is good and evil units, right?
Yeah.
Like, to really... But then, if your only payoff is triply, if you're not getting, like, a mage payoff for random spells...
Hat Ball's
you
still
can get
good.
away with Hat Ball just being a bunch of stats. You don't have to be all in on that as a comp.
Yeah, absolutely.
I wanted to mention with Merlin quickly. I don't know, this is similar to my Miri recommendation, because this isn't a comp that I've tried. This is something I lost to the other day.
Sure.
And it looked really good. So I lost the finals to this Merlin player with 2 golden monster books, with 2 golden copycats in front of him.
Sure, a copybook, a classic it was the best comp when I started playing in, like, August. It's changed a ton, obviously, since then. Monster Book used to be able to cast Knighthood. That was fun.
I would never play the game on Monster Book and cast Knighthood. That's insane to me.
I think that's true. It definitely didn't have a curated spell list. It just cast completely random spells.
Sure.
But yeah, obviously it's changed a lot since then. It's like Copycat Good Boy. Like, Copycat Good Boy is still a comp you can play. It's still a ton of stats. It's just not ridiculous like it used to be. And yeah, Copycat Monster Book sounds really good. But how did you get there? When did you take one copycat and were happy with it? Like,
my assumption is that Merlin just picked up a bunch of monster books in the mid game.
Yeah,
good on Merlin, and they're a fine unit.
Yeah, once you got a triple monster book, you could have one copycat and get there. That makes sense to me. But it's pretty, like, one monster book or even 2 monster books isn't enough for me to want copycat. So yeah, hard to get.
Yeah, there. I think a lot of these top tier comps are weak to scam stuff, and I think a monster book can be scam stuff. Like with Slay, they've got 1 or 2 oversized units. That's 1 or 2 Pigamorphs. If you're casting 8 spells,
absolutely. I mean, that was always why Pumpkin has always had a fairly good Slay matchup, despite in theory having a bunch of units that can be slain. Right, like that. In theory, Pumpkin should be like animals, where it's terrible against Slay because everything dies, and summoning more things that attack and still don't kill the Slay thing, and the Slay thing gets to attack again and grows even more is disastrous. But when you're summoning those things and they're Medusas and apple trees, then you're fine.
Yeah. That brings us down neatly into A tier, which kicked things off with Pumpkin Scam.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, Pumpkin has been nerfed back to its tier 6 form. Pumpkin is no longer the zeitgeist of the meta. It's still really good though. Like, there's nothing wrong with pumpkins. It's way harder to transition into now. That's the main difference. Before, it was so easy to speculate on I will get a pumpkin during tier 5 because there were more of them in the pool, and you could afford to spend 5.0 rolling because you're not just going to die, hopefully, by that stage of the game. If you spend tier 6 rolling, well, it costs, you only get like 6-7 rolls to find it, and if you don't, your comp's kind of a disaster.
Yeah.
So Pumpkin, harder to end up in, but still really good.
Pumpkin, for me, is more of a get-out-of-jail-free card for not having found one of the other comp.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
It's, oh no, it's 5.2. Maybe I'll just buy XP and start rolling for Pumpkin. maybe I'll just buy an apple tree and hope there's a pumpkin I can move in on.
Yeah.
Because it can be too late to start any kind of scaling comp going, like
Yeah,
trees or like sleigh.
especially if like something like a Nyan is a unit that I'm buying a fair amount at the moment, because I think treasures are one of the best ways that you can it's a necessary way to compete with the scaling comps. If you didn't find dwarves, or if you don't have a princess wipe buffing your dwarves, if you don't have sleigh units that have already got a bunch of sleighs, if you haven't got any Heartwood Elders, how on earth are you going to keep up with the late game comps? The answer is high tier treasures, and so Nyan is a unit that I'm often picking up, which transitions fine into a pumpkin. Obviously, not the most exciting unit to have in your board, but a 2020 will tussle for a bit while you make up the difference.
Next up in A tier, we've got trees, as you alluded to there. This hasn't changed that much. This is all about getting those Heartwood Elders on time, using them to scale some units, potentially having a Shoulder Fairies in there, though sometimes having in some evil power on a Shoulder Fairies is hard.
Yeah, I have not been able to figure out Shoulder Fairies and trees. I've seen some people say, yeah, just have a Spellweaver as your evil unit. I'm like, what? How have you, or like have some other evil unit that isn't a tree pumping, like. If I have 100 power attack evil unit, I didn't end up trees. I don't understand how this has happened. So yeah, I haven't managed to make Shoulder Fairies work.
I think the Shoulder Fairies thing that I did most recently was something like a Doom Breath with a Sting or something like that, where it's not legit late game power level. Well, it's not super late game power, but you don't need that anymore.
Yeah,
because the super late game doesn't exist. What it is it's a 2100, and a 2100 is a good unit.
Yeah, for sure, fine. And then otherwise, I think a huge part of the strength of trees is Saltac Ancient is in a really good place right now. It obviously doesn't do much against dwarves. It does nothing against dwarves. It's pretty bad against dwarves. But against Dragonslay in particular, it is backbreaking. Like, not only do you, like, their Lightning Dragon not only doesn't get to slay, it often suicides. Like, if they have their dragon in slot 1, it attacks for its trigger, does nothing, attacks again, dies. You're like, this was amazing. This was so good for me. I'm fighting, not only have I denied, your Yorm is now a 2020, which I will just kill, and you wasted your first attack.
We got a 2-for-1, it was...
Yeah, and even against Pumpkin, like, if the opponent's doing, like, Ancient Sarcophagus Pumpkin, which is one of the more natural ways to end up in that comp, well, Saltac again, just in a really good place. Your backline, which is often your low toughness units, gets to live, and that's really strong.
I've had Saltac do work against like a trophy hunter all in on some money stuff. Like
sure. Yeah, so I think Saltac is a big part of why I might move into trees, and yeah, Heartwood Elder is as good as it's ever been if you've got the units.
I wanted to mention quickly Horn of Olympus. Two of the top comps we've talked about so far, Slay is where Horn of Olympus, it actually has text. It lets you combine your Baba Yagas with your mermaids. I have now multiple times used Horn of Olympus to have Golden Heartwood Elders affect a whole front line. And I think that's really powerful. I think turning it into a really powerful scaling treasure does do some work.
Yeah, for sure. That does have to, like, certainly triple my Heartwood Elder, take Horn of Olympus is a very natural and very strong thing to do. I will say that trees is often, the issue at that point is that I don't often have 4 trees to go in my front line at that stage. I'll then pick some up, but like usually I don't, trees tends to be a 3 unit comp. It's the Heartwood Elder and the 2 units it's buffing, and then by the time I'm tier 6, I'll pick up the rest of my trees because all the good trees are tier 6. But you can definitely move in.
I think the thing that changes that equation a little bit is Saltac.
Yeah.
And especially because I don't always want to triple my Saltacs.
Sure. Yeah. If you run Saltac protecting your whole front line, and then like a Nutcracker is fine. He's so small, but it's a good treasure.
Yeah, a Nutcracker can stick around, a Baby She can stick around. You can pick up a rotten apple tree and be okay with it.
And there's, Darkwood Creeper can sometimes exist. And once you've got the golden Heartwood Elder, then it can go in the front line. It was probably chilling in the back until then, but now it can go in the front.
Yeah.
So that's trees. I would say trees definitely comes with the caveat of, like, historically, trees was fairly good against dwarves before Tweedledee, because although their units were huge, they had no ranged at all, and if trees was really good at trading 1-for-1, and then having 1 Robin Hood would beat that comp. Now, if they've got 2 Tweedledees, you need to have more Robin Hoods than they have Tweedles. And that can be a lot, because one of those is tier 6 and one of them's tier 4.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Trees versus Dwarves is a little rough.
Trees versus Dwarves, I think, tends to come down to, did you have a rotten apple tree and did their Tweedle attack it?
Yeah.
Which is kind of sad and gross.
Yeah.
Because it's not a huge percentage.
Yeah, with Dwarves being the best comp, Trees definitely comes with the caveat of, you're going to come second a fair bit, but a comp that comes consistently second, I think is fine. If the strongest player happened to pick Dragonslay, you'll crush them, so that's nice.
Finally, in A tier, we've got Dragonless Slay. So this we've talked about already. This is your Slay comp that doesn't necessarily need all the pieces to get there. To be clear, you still need a lot of the pieces. You can't be Slay without a Baba Yaga. You can't be Slay without a Yorm. If you don't get them on the Yorm, you're not going to make the top 2 of the game.
I also want to, in this sort of category, want to mention Slovs, which is Slay Dwarves. This is more of a mid-game comp. Like, this is a way that you can end up in Dragonless Slay, where in the mid-game, you have a reasonably sized doubly, like a 7/7 doubly, the kind of thing that just happens quite naturally, or maybe a Tweedledee, and you put that in front of a Riverwish Mermaid, and you use that as your mid-game strength, where it's then quite easy to pivot in either direction. We think Dwarves and Slay are some of the best comps, and from Slovs, you're probably weaker than both. Like, you're not as good as full Dwarves, and you're not as good as full Slay, but you're very open to seeing the tier 5 Baba Yaga, or seeing the turn 6.0 Lordy, and moving either direction, committing quite hard to it, and being okay. And, there is natural synergy there. Both Doubly and Tweedledee would love to get some bonus stats from your mermaid. That is, it can be quite hard to get extra stats on Doubly, and that's definitely a good way to do it.
That makes a lot of sense to me. Slovs as a mid-game strategy, very open to pivoting about. Down into B tier, these are the comps that I haven't played in the last week, or I've played like once or twice.
Yeah.
We're looking at animals. I don't really know how to build animals on this meta, and I don't want to try. You're both very weak to dragons if you've got bear stains at the back and what have you, and you feed Slay. Slay has such a party against animals in the mid-game. It's genuinely... I think part of the reason Slay is such a good comp is because people are taking baby bears and giving Slay a lot of power. I wouldn't be surprised if in the tournament, with no one playing animals, Slay is actually slightly worse than it would be on ladder.
Sure, I can believe that. Yeah, I think, mostly you see Geppettos doing this, or sometimes you see people who see Wonder Waddle or Pied Piper and think you're meant to go animals, which is not really what you're meant to be doing. I just use those for their ability to get treasures, mostly. But yeah, I think animals as a comp feeds Slay, it feeds Angries fairly effectively. It's kind of a disaster to have, even with, Golden Bearstein, the issue is always... Cool. So my baby bear summons a 60/60, but first it's a 4/4. In terms of card advantage, you've got two 60/60s in this bear, but in terms of the number of attacks that you're using effectively, you're way down. They get to attack, they're killing every single time, and then they get to go through their front line, get to their back line, which is a bunch of ranged units or whatever. If it's dwarves, that's not really true, but they can cycle round. Maybe you kill off a few of their units, but their big thing survives, and their big thing is going to attack and kill and grow and attack and kill and grow, and oh god, stop. So yeah, I think Animals doesn't really have the big payoffs. Again, you need Golden Bearstein or two Bearsteins, which is still really vulnerable to that backline hate. It's a bit of a nightmare. Yeah, outside of Geppetto, I wouldn't even think about it. And on Geppetto, I preferred Pumpkin.
We've also got Classic Good Boy down here in B tier. I think you can still get a lot of stats out of a Good Boy. You can still, if you've been doing a Royals mid-game or whatever with some Court Wizards, if you get 100 Attack Sword, Good Boy is going to be great. But as we say, all the tier 7 treasures are their own comp.
Yeah, the issue with Good Boy is that, unlike a lot of these comps are cool, find your tier 6 unit, and then you have a comp, right? Dwarves, Lordy, now we're online. Pumpkin, found the Pumpkin, now we're online. Good Boy, we found the Good Boy, cool, now we just need to find some buff spells. Wait, what? The issue is you find the Good Boy, and it's a 2/2, and that's terrible. You need to either have a Sting or a Haunted Helm, something that immediately gives it something, or a Golden Lady of the Lake or something to give it enough stats to be a unit immediately, and that's just a little, that extra step is enough to push it quite a way down. And there's the problem that a good mid-game is not in a great place right now. No. Dwarves has always been pretty good against good comps on the basis of being a quite high toughness composition. They've just got a lot of stats in the mid-game, and they've got a lot of quite square stats, and I think good comps, often with Godmother, are very reliant on trading with their high toughness. Good beats evil, because toughness beats high power units.
Yes.
High square stats beat high toughness, low power, and so that doesn't help good versus dwarves, which is the most common mid-game threat. And versus Slay, again, Godmother in the back is gonna get sniped. You can play Soldak in good, but the problem here, like, Godmother plus Soltak is not a combo. Soltak does not
No.
need more toughness. That is nothing. It needs some power, and the units that give power are evil. So you're in a rough spot. I had a game where I was doing Romeo Juliet stuff, and it was I was stuck. I was like, I hate this is a prison. I hate this. I've got these Romeos and I've got these Juliets, and I can't stop. That there's nowhere to go other than hope that this mid-game strength is enough that I can immediately find a good boy and buff it. That was my game plan. Obviously, it didn't get there. It's really bad.
Yeah.
It's not even strong enough for the mid-game now. It's a mid-game only comp that isn't good enough for the mid-game. I don't understand how you're doing that.
I will say I have seen some good comps in the mid-game going deep on some court wizards. I've seen some 86 power court wizards. I didn't lose to them, but I did see them. And I think that's the only thing that good has going for it in the mid-game is, can you get a lot of power onto some court wizards quite quickly. The time that I went good boy that stands out to me from the last week was I kissed into a golden Grumblegore. And so then the good boy starting off with 22 power, and suddenly you have a legit board. You say to turn the Grumblegore good at some point. That's the sort of thing that you can be like, oh, let's watch out for good boy now.
Yeah, for sure.
Finally, in F tier, I've put Royals. I don't think I've played Royals.
Yeah, I certainly haven't picked Miri this patch.
Even after I recommended Miri-Slay to you, after I talked about Miri-Slay a couple of weeks ago, I've now tried it 3 times. It's not a thing. If Royals become good, I think it might be a thing. In the meantime, Royals aren't there, so Miri doesn't really have a get-out plan. You're just trying to draft Slay as a random hero.
Yeah. Otherwise, like, Prince Arthur Royals is a really nightmarish place to be. Like, you need so many pieces, and stars really have to align. And even then, you don't keep up with the late game stuff unless you transition into Good Boy. You're asking a lot of yourself. There's probably some other comps that are like F tier that we're not even mentioning because we wouldn't even consider them. But I think that basically sums up all of the things that are like, you would even consider a viable comp. Again, plenty of treasure-based comps can exist. In Beginning Stone, anything is a comp.
Yes.
Like, the Ark and whichever random 2 and 3 drops you found on the floor. Like, you can get there with these things, but realistically, those are the kind of comps you should be keeping in mind, which ones to steer away from when possible. Like, I genuinely, if I find myself heading towards animals, I often want to think, do I have an escape plan? Sometimes the answer is no. Again, I had that Romeo and Juliet game where I was on rails, I kept seeing Romeos and Juliets, I couldn't not take them with the position I was in, because I would just, anytime I tried to transition, I would probably die.
You have to an extent play the cards that you're dealt. You can't control the shops that you're going to see.
Yeah. So and you can't spend all of tier 4 rolling. Like, the mid game is really brutal. If you spend tier 4 trying to find the pieces you need, it's death.
You're going to take a lot of damage trying to assemble specific pieces.
Yeah, cool.
We do have an option to avoid spending tier 4 rolling for death, and that is to go hard on econ. And no hero goes harder on econ than Zelhua. Unfortunately, my stats as Zelhua are garbage nightmare. I'll double check quickly stats since update. I have played Zelhua 3 times for an average finish of 5th.
Oof. Yeah, I've got the complete opposite. More than half of my lifetime games as Zelhua have been on this patch, and I've been crushing it. So, average placement of 2.27. Only one game that I missed the top 4 out of 11. 5 crowns. Just a really, really solid hero, and I'm picking them like they're S tier. Like, I don't have some patches, obviously. There's a really clear Horde Dragon alone in S tier, but I've been picking Zelhua really highly, like it's a hero that I really, really want. And I think most of that comes down to flexibility. This meta has a few different comps that are really viable, but unlike the patch before, where it was, if you're not pumpkins or dwarves, you're dead, there's at least 3 comps that I'm relatively happy to move between based on what I see. Hatball is its own special thing where you need to have had the treasures, but most of these are unit-based comps, and they're not that treasure-dependent. I think a less treasure-dependent meta really benefits Zelhua. Obviously, a lot of the second-tier comps do really, really want you to have good treasures, Pumpkin in particular.
Yes.
It does want some extra, a Ring of Rage or something, but Zelhua both has the flexibility to move between those comps, and actually has one of the best access to tier 5 treasures in the game.
Yes, you can pick up a Nian for free as Zelhua.
Exactly.
Why would you ever pass a Nian?
Yeah, so Nian's really free, which also makes Slay really good. Like, you're probably the hero with the best access to Evil Eye, because those Nians are so free on that character.
And that makes sense. Slay is also a lot of expensive characters that you want as well, right?
Exactly.
There's nothing below a 4-drop that you want.
Yeah, it's also a really natural place to play Slovs. You know, if we're doing Slovs is a natural pivoting kind of comp, and Zelhua has always been king of pivoting. Just play your early game. You know, you don't have hero power early. I think, you know, this is definitely a hero that's going to be better on ladder than in tournaments. I think in tournaments you might get your teeth kicked in, but you can play your early game, just survive. Don't worry too much about direction. Don't feel like you have to pick up a speculative Princess White, which I tend to do on a lot of heroes. If I see Princess White, I'll take her because it's one of my best outs to find mid-game direction.
Yep.
Zelhua doesn't need that as much. I'll still take it if it's with some dwarves, don't get me wrong. But just play the tier 3 for strength, and on tier 4, just the fact on 4.0, you can buy like 3 tier 4 units. If you've, you know, filled your hand, you bought a chicken or something. You got 8 gold on tier 4. Buying 3 4-drops on that turn, impossible. Just completely unrealistic. And even buying 2 that's no rolls, right?
Yes. 2, you have to immediately be offered them and just get them.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. Whereas Zelhua can buy 3, and, you know, even with 2 units in hand, you can even take a roll, and finding 3 tier 4 units you want, they don't even need to be that synergistic. Just being able to immediately upgrade your Mims to Sporkos without feeling like it's only 1 gold discount, but 1 gold's a lot. To save 3 gold on that turn is ridiculous. That's a huge, and you're going to continue to get that economic benefit as the game goes on. It's a lot of money. It doesn't kick in, but I don't think this is a very mid-game meta. Like,
yes.
A lot of the tier 4 is the key stage of this game at the moment, for sure. And yeah, I think Zelhua is the best at making use of those tier 4 turns. And then yeah, transitioning in the late game, like even especially comps like trees that are very tier 6 dependent, you have a much easier time. You can Echo Wood is a unit that often goes into comps, but only once you've already got the other pieces. Like, buying an Echo Wood before you have a Lordy as dwarves is really scary. It can work with Tweedles, but dicey.
It's yeah, you still have to, like, your Tweedle has to be big enough but also die before we get round to the Echo Wood.
Yeah, so it's hard to take that Echo Wood speculatively. Zelhua can do it way, way easier. You can just buy a Lordy, and maybe if you find a second Lordy, hard pivot. Yeah, just very, very flexible, very open hero that I've been having a ton of success with. It a little like Horde Dragon on the last patch. Sometimes you die on like 4.0. What can you do? Like, practice that early game. You do have no hero power. Sometimes you get paired against a bunch of people with a very early hero power, and you'll get your teeth kicked in. If that doesn't happen, you can stabilize really fast on 4.0.
So do we still expect Zelhua to be worse in a tournament meta then?
Yeah, worse, but I wouldn't not pick them, I guess.
Sure.
Because I think they're really good. Like, in the same way that a lot of the late game heroes have always been worse in a tournament meta, but if they're good enough, I still want them. You know, like, you know, you can say Horde Dragon, or Horde Dragon was never a great example because they can have that power spike relatively early. But Apocalypse, I guess, when Apocalypse was really good.
Yeah, I think Apocalypse is the archetypical only good in the late game hero.
Yeah. And yeah, like, or Grandmother. I played Grandmother in the last tournament, even though she wasn't good early. It was fine, because I thought she was in a relatively good place. But yeah.
I still think Grandmother's in an okay place. I was going to mention with Zelhua, the 5-point life buffer that you get at the start of the game as well.
That definitely helps make up.
In these lobbies where everyone's below 10 life simultaneously, that five extra life points can make a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely helps.
I want to ask a quick question about Princess White. So you say, So as you say, as almost any hero in the game, you're going to take a Princess White early.
Yeah.
Even without dwarves, because obviously you want the white before the dwarves.
Yeah.
Does that mean you lock for Princess White on like 3.1 if you don't have dwarves yet? Because that's the decision I've really struggled with. I'm happy to take a Princess White, and I'm happy to take Princess White and then find the dwarves. But knowing I'm locking a shop without dwarves, going into 3.2, which as we know is the most awkward turn in the game. This is the turn where it's hardest to spend your gold becoming strong.
Obviously, it's hard to, you know, everything's context dependent. I can't give a clean answer of yes, always lock Princess White on 3.1 like that. I can't answer questions like that.
Thank you. I'll take that soundbite and I will run with it.
No. So I think one of the key distinctions is Princess White with any other dwarf in the shop versus Princess White with no dwarf in the shop. Like, Princess White plus Lucky, yeah, I probably would lock that. Although Lucky's already getting kind of bad by 3.1. Like, end of 3.1 is probably the last moment I would consider Princess White a speculative 3.1. I mean, again, it kind of...
Oh, I would take a Princess White on 3.2, I think.
It kind of depends how bad your board is, right? If you've still got some
Yes.
Billy Gruffs on your board, Princess White, I mean, it is just better than a Billy Gruff. Don't get me wrong. If I've got the evil support, I will run my Princess White, and she will be fine as a 5/6. That will do. But yeah, it's because the stats are all backloaded. It's tricky. It's tricky. Yeah, like I do buy Princess White a lot. I find it hard to picture myself in my head locking Princess White.
What I'm hearing is we need an excuse to lock it at that point, but that excuse could come from different places. So that excuse could be a dwarf in the shop. It could be we're Horde Dragons, so actually a quest unit's going to be great for us.
We're Miri, wait.
Someone who really wants to be dwarves, like Galahad or Grandmother.
Sure.
But if you're just a random hero, if you're a Merlin, then that play makes no sense.
Yeah, I think, yes, I'm looking for an excuse, but it can be the softest excuse in the world. Like, I really like Princess White. I think she's really good. The tier 3 treasures are still in a fantastic place in this meta. Dwarves is a really good place that I want to be.
Oh, but if you take a brand new shop, you're more likely to get a pair for the 3 drops you already have, or a triple.
Agreed. Like, that's why we need the context. Like, if I've got a pair of stags or something, then I probably wouldn't lock, because getting the stag triple is a massive power spike. If I'm Wonder Waddle, I probably don't like it. This is why our podcast is so important, is because everything is so context dependent. We try and give, feelings for these sort of things, but I can't give you a clean, always do this, always don't.
Yeah, I think it's useful to walk through what a decision process looks like in that kind of situation. Oh, this is an interesting question. As Zelhua, we want to be strong early and we don't have a hero power, right? We just want to protect ourselves, basically. Yep. Does that mean we're taking Humpty Dumpties? Are we playing Humpty Dumpty as this combat spell, knowing that we're going to get the econ payoff later to replace it? Like, because I'll take Humpty Dumpties as Loki, for example, because as Loki, sometimes you cast her for glory on turn 1 of the game, and at that point, Humpty Dumpty is the nut.
Yeah.
Because you're always getting that unit back. Unless the opponent also has a Humpty Dumpty, but then you get to go home and cry. Like, you can write a salty tweet about it, and that's as good as winning a lobby. So I end up with Humpty Dumpties on Loki a lot. Is Zelhua in a similar space, knowing you're not getting that econ payoff until further down the line? Are we still okay taking the life total buffer?
Zelhua is definitely one of the opponents where if I'm paired against Zelhua, turn actual 1 or 2 of the game, I often think, how can I arrange the units that I have to beat a Humpty? Like, if I'm given the choice of some random units in the shop, I might take a tiny over a blind mouse versus Zelhua in order to try and trade up with the Humpty, because I do think Humpty is a unit that people buy as Zelhua. It's not a unit I buy as Zelhua, because it's not a unit I buy. But I think it's worth... Yeah, I definitely think about it. Again, a Humpty plus 4 glory is a thing as basically any character. But the issue with Humpty, and the issue has always been with Humpty, is that if it doesn't work, you have died. Like, so on turn 2, I buy a Humpty to try and be a combat spell. I get unlucky in the myriad of ways that can happen. Oh, my opponent happened to be paired against Sharebear turn 1, so they've got 3 units, so they get to kill my Humpty. Gross. So many ways that you can get absolutely destroyed by taking a Humpty. And then when that happens, you go into 2.2 with 1 unit, and you've got no hero power as a backup. You are deader than dead. Like, as Loki, you can kind of get away with a slightly more speculative approach, because if Loki has a bunch of outs to give you early tempo.
Yes.
He can give you early XP, or he can give you early gingerbread houses.
We might get that econ spell again a couple of turns down the line. If we shrink Ray, it doesn't matter that we lost a unit.
Exactly. Like, Loki saves you so much early game gold that you can afford to take risks like that. Whereas I think Zelhua is good enough in the mid game that even if they're at 23 health on 4.0, then you can definitely be lower than that. But like, if you can get to the mid game, I'm okay having lost most of my early fights as long as I haven't been hemorrhaging. And I think Egg is a way to end up hemorrhaging pretty badly.
Damn. I'm looking forward to it for having an excuse to take Humpty Dumpty.
I'm sure you'll find one day.
I'm sure we'll Find one day.
The only other thing is kind of treasures that support the economy nature of Zelhua. Staff of the
Yes.
Old Toad is one that people often ask questions about. Is Staff of the Old Toad good on Zelhua? The answer is yes. It's not. You are to some extent doubling down on economy. There is, if you're a hero that doesn't provide any stats, and so even if all your units are super cheap, if you're not tripling them, you're not actually gaining a ton on board. Like a bunch of unbuffed tier 6 units is still not really a comp. You need to have found ways to give them additional stats, whether that's scaling or treasures or whatever. Obviously, one of the advantages of Staff of the Old Toad is it does make it really easy to then replace itself because you're finding
Yes.
a bunch more nyans and so on. So yeah, I do take Staff of the Old Toad. I think it is pretty good.
The other econ treasures, like a spinning gold or a fool's gold on Zelhua, is that worth going for as well, just because you can get additional value from a bit more gold?
I think I'm very unlikely to triple 2-drops on Zelhua. Like, I guess off a Cinderella, I'd end up with a spinning gold, but like, I'm pretty low on speculatively taking 2-drop pairs without a good reason to, and Zelhua does not have a reason to. And then otherwise, Fool's Gold is interesting. XP is something I want as Zelhua, obviously. You can really make up for the tempo loss of buying an XP spell, because when you hit tier 5, again, when you hit tier 5, you've got 10 gold. My math is slightly off on these things in my head. You've got 11 gold default? Yeah, it's 11 gold.
Often it's different because in half the games you've bought 1 XP before tier 5.
Sure.
So
let's say you got 11 gold. Normally people can buy 2 5-drops. You can potentially buy 4. That's such a big difference. And so yeah, if you can be 1 XP ahead, like again, if you're 2 XP ahead, you hit 5.0 on 9 gold. What? What are you gonna do? Buy 1 5-drop and hope it's good? Zelhua gets to buy 3. It's
roll for your Baba Yaga. Baba Yaga's not a huge upgrade right now. It's an upgrade in your ability to scale.
Exactly. So yeah, Zelhua really does make good use of XP. You do struggle with that. It's hard to buy XP when you aren't strong, and getting strong quickly as Zelhua on tier 4 is tricky. But if you can do it, you can even afford to lose, especially if you've got a little early in the, a little lucky in the early game. Maybe you had a frog prince, so you actually managed to win some of your early fights. Then you can definitely greed it out. If you're at 15, don't buy XP. You'll be fine. Just buy more units. They're great.
Yeah, use your hero power. Don't keep investing in the XP. That makes a lot of sense. It's sounding to me like the econ you really want then is the Merlin's Hat. So make that XP cheaper, because you're spending your gold on units.
You don't
getting the ability to cast a combat spell as well. It's going to have more value.
You're also doing relatively less rolling on Zelhua. Certainly, because my units are cheap, I do just buy random speculative. Like, I'm way more likely to buy pairs of random 4-drops. Like, often I have 1 Lady of the Lake, and I'm like, is it worth picking up a second Lady of the Lake? She's not going to stick around. It's a lot. Am I willing to pay 8 gold? Maybe more for a tier 4 treasure? Probably not. I guess I'll just stick with 1. Zelhua, I definitely would. It's way lower cost of entry. So yeah, I buy more random units and roll a little less. So I see less spells. I'm less likely to find econ spells or free spells. So I would say I am more likely to want a Merlin's Hat to cast the spells I do see.
So it sounds like the only econ treasure that's guaranteed much worse on Zelhua is the Holy Grail.
There's certainly no synergy there.
Cool. Final thing to mention on today's show is podcast news. We are now available on YouTube. We have received requests from would-be listeners that they wish the podcast had a YouTube channel. Apparently that's a way people like to download their podcast. We've always been available on all of the podcast services that I could think of. If you know of one that we're not on, 1, how are you listening to me? 2, let us know and we'll try and get there. So, it's called 7th Tier Podcast over on youtube.com. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And we actually have a giveaway lined up for our subscribers.
Oh, amazing. If you type 7th Tier Pod, it auto-completes podcast. It knows us.
Take that, algorithms. It might only know us to you. Like,
that's fair.
Google probably knows about your relationship to this podcast.
So yeah, we've been sponsored by the folk over at Good Luck Games. We've been given a bunch of codes to give away. We're going to pick 5 commenters on this video, roughly 1 week, in 1 week's time. If you're listening to us after then, it's probably too late, but we've got a whole lot of codes. We're going to give away so much. So yeah, do continue to check us out. There's probably a giveaway ongoing. It might not be as many as 5 codes every week. Certainly can't sustain that, but we've got a lot to give away, and hopefully this gets people to check out the YouTube. Even if you've listened to this on another podcast service, if you want to give us a like, give us a subscribe, drop a comment in, it all really helps us out. We don't take any ads. We're not making any money off this at the moment. If you could support us by just helping us where you can, we'd really appreciate that.
Yeah, but best form of support is awareness. Tell your friend who's not good enough at Storybook Brawl that this is the place to come. I should say each of the codes is 4,000 dust enough for 1 hero. I believe we're currently saying you should spend your code on Zelhua.
Yeah, probably. A Horde Dragon's a free hero, right? So yeah.
Yeah, it's that or Wonder Waddle. Wonder Waddle's been S tier for the longest. I think if you haven't invested in the Waddle yet, it's time to get a Waddle in.
Yeah, for sure.
So the way to enter that is track down the video of episode 16, titled Pending. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and drop a comment underneath. That's our show. Thank you so much for listening. You can find us on the Discord. I'm Jethro, he's Synthesis. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at 7th Tier Podcast, the number 7, the word podcast. You can like and subscribe to us on YouTube, 7th Tier Podcast. We'll be back next week with the same content, but we'll be saying different words. Until then, don't forget, it's not a unit I buy or sell, Hewer, because it's not a unit I buy. Have a great week.